Hi guys, this is part 2 of the new CLAT pattern which was released by the CLAT consortium last year. In the last session, we'll discuss the two sections that will be asked in this year's paper, which was English language and current affairs. In this session, we will discuss the other three sections, which are logical reasoning, legal reasoning and quantitative techniques. Now, we all know that the percentage of marks that were allotted to every section remains the same, right? So earlier legal reasoning section used to have 25% weightage. It still remains the same. We do not know the exact number of questions that will be asked. However, the percentage of marks that have been allotted more or less same. So we start with the logical reasoning section in this session. So the logical reasoning section this time is made slightly difficult for most of us because they've made it critical reasoning mostly. So what critical reasoning exactly is? There is a premise, there is a passage given which is based on a premise. Now what is a premise? Premise is anything on which a particular fact situation or rather an entire passage is based. So premise is something that we need to figure out when we start solving these questions, and on the basis of that premise they come to a conclusion. Conclusion is the ending or the end result that they arrive onto. So we will be asked question on premise and conclusion. We will be asked questions on assumption reasoning. These are the kind of questions that are generally asked in critical reasoning. Now, why are we being asked such questions? This is because the CLAT consortium expects us to comprehend the passages well and think like a lawyer. Now, what do you mean to think like a lawyer? When you are asked to think like a lawyer, you basically try and understand the meaning of everything. The true and literal meaning is, and as well as the main point on which a particular passage or anything that is given to us to read is based. So here we need to understand as to what is the base on which a particular passage is based and arrive to a conclusion. Now, to make this easier for you, you can solve the past year LSAT papers because they have a tendency of asking really good critical reasoning questions. And there are certain books also which are listed at the end of the video. You can go and have a look. One of the strategy that I as a first-hand CLAT aspirant would like to give you is, when I was preparing for CLAT, there are certain sections that I was really uncomfortable with. This could be English, that could be critical reasoning, could be anything, and these are different sections for different people. So what I used to do is, so for example, I am weak in the logical reasoning section and there are 6 passages asked this time. So I will attempt 3 at one go and then I move to some other section, solve that section which I'm more comfortable with, and then come back to the other 3 remaining questions. Now how that helps me is, it helps me from not freezing my mind. So when I keep doing something which I do not like, I tend to freeze my mind and my mind tends to stop working. Now we have to keep in mind that we have 2 hours to solve these 150 questions, and that is not much. Even if the number of questions are reduced, it isn't much. So we need to take into account the time given to each and every question. And if we are not comfortable with a particular section and we do this as I told you, then it becomes slightly easier for us to attempt all the questions properly. Now, logical reasoning section, although there are critical reasoning questions asked, but the CLAT consortium has mentioned that there might be certain other questions which were asked in previous papers, such as syllogisms, blood relations, family tree, and so on. So those kind of questions will be slightly easier for you, and you can refer to the past year question paper as well, and that might be able to help you as to what are the kind of questions that are generally asked with respect to these topics. Now the next section that we discuss is the quantitative techniques, which is basically maths, and all of us hate maths, right? Okay, maybe not all of us, but yeah, most of us hate maths. It's the most dreadful subject that has happened to us ever. Yes, but this time I assure you that maths or quantitative technique section is going to be our savior in this year's paper. And why do I say this? Because this is the only section in which a course is predefined. So there are certain topics that are given by the CLAT consortium, and those topics are up to 10th standard maths, and only questions can be asked only from those topics. Now, this is a huge benefit to us because if we study those topics properly, then these marks are definitely in our pocket. So, the kind of questions that are asked is again, they're going to be passages and they're going to be some factual or numerical information or quantitative information given on those passages. And based on those passages, there will be some sort of a pie chart or a graph that will be given, and we need to analyze that information and prepare answers accordingly. Now, one advice that I would like to give here is that the questions that are asked this time are interdependent because they're asked from a single passage. Okay, so when you do the rough work in maths, make sure that you do it properly and fairly so as to understand as to how did you reach to that particular conclusion. So, answer to question number 3 may be dependent on your solution that you did for question number 1. But if you do not understand while reaching question number 3 as to what you did in question number 1, then it becomes problematic and you won't be able to understand it and you'll have to do everything again. So that is one advice that you can take and it will be really helpful in solving the paper quickly. Now the last section that is there and is the tiebreaker in CLAT is the legal reasoning section. Legal reasoning section, the good part about legal reasoning section this time is that the preparation more or less remains the same. What preparation the CLAT aspirants did till last year, even in the new paper, the preparation remains the same. Now, the kind of questions that were asked earlier was a set of principle that was used to given to us, and a set of facts was given to us, and on the basis of those facts, applying the principles, we were given 4 options, and we had to choose in those 4 options. This time, what the CLAT consortium has done is they've mixed the principle as well as the facts. So when we study all the principles properly and we are well prepared with all the principles, then we know as to what are the principles and what are the facts and what are the small nuances that we have to look into, right? So we need to understand those things really properly and study all the principles with respect to the Contract Act or torts, constitutional law. We need to know basics of all these basic laws. That is why this time that has been intermixed so as to find out our comprehension ability and how much we understand when we look at the question paper or the passage. And reading the passage is again really important in all the 5 sections, but in the legal reasoning section it's really important because these are the kind of questions which will be based on 1 or 2 words here and there and will make mistakes when we ignore or do not read those words properly. Answers to questions will change in words like and or. And if we miss words like this, then there is a high possibility that our answers might be wrong. Now, how do we prepare for the legal reasoning section? Is to do the basic principles of the contracts, of torts, constitutional law, and so on. Now, in the later sections, we'll also do some really important principles and what are the kind of questions that are expected. Other than that, you are expected to do landmark judgments that were given in 2019 or this year because these judgments may form a part of the current affairs section as well as the legal reasoning section. You are also expected to do landmark judgments that were given after the Constitution of India came into being. So there are about 25 to 30 judgments that were given. You don't need to read the judgments in its entirety. You just need to understand as to what was the ratio decidendi or what was the main point on which these judgments or the reasoning on these judgments were based. Because if you do this exercise, it not only helps you with legal reasoning, it also helps you with logical reasoning to understand as to how to come to a conclusion. What is the premise and how to finally come to a conclusion on the basis of that premise. So these are certain important topics that might be asked this year and certain basic principles of criminal law, civil law, family law as well, which we will discuss in the future course of time. I wish you all the best for this year's paper and keep attending our sessions for really useful and important insights into the various concepts which are related to CLAT and various other concepts as well. And with respect to the books that may be important for various sections, you can find their mention in the description. So if you like our videos, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you don't miss any updates from us.